She stood in the glow of crystal lights while a child's laugh cut through the room like a blade. The wine slid down her face, warm and bright, and the crowd's surprise turned into a harsh, small music of phone cameras and laughter. In that moment she felt the old weight settle on her shoulders, the weight of being seen differently, of being tested in a room built by other people's rules. Her chest tightened, but she did not scream. She kept herself steady like a tree in wind. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, so you never miss any of our upcoming videos and stay connected with us. He was the face of privilege, smart clothes, a careless grin, taught to think power made cruelty acceptable. His parents laughed as if the world had nothing to teach them but dominance. They filmed, they winked, they thought it was a private joke. For her, the moment was a painful echo of a lifetime of being judged by color and not by work. The child who poured the wine was only acting out a lesson learned at home, but the harm landed like a stone. People recorded and watched, and their eyes measured her worth by the smear on her dress. It hurt because it was meant to hurt. It cut, not just silk but the soft place where pride and patience meet. She soaked in the hurt, then chose a response that surprised them all, calm strength instead of a noisy breakdown. Later, an old housekeeper reached from the crowd and later still became a quiet ally. She had worked for the family for decades, keeping notes, small but steady marks of the things nobody else remembered. She had collected the sighs and insults, the little cruelties that built up into something shameful. When she finally slipped a note and a satchel of papers into the right hands, she offered more than proof. She offered a life's testimony. Their first meeting was soft and careful. Over coffee in a quiet corner, the older woman opened worn notebooks and pressed records into the younger woman's hands. Dates, names, small incidents that added up like raindrops until a flood was possible. The older woman's voice trembled, not from fear of the powerful, but from relief that someone would finally listen. As they read together, the truth smelled of old paper and long, held sorrow, but also of clarity. Numbers showed patterns, journals showed slaves of habit who thought cruelty harmless. You could see how small humiliations became part of a family's daily menu. The young leader realized, then, that the wine on her dress was not a single act. It was the outward sign of an inward rot. She faced a choice that night: swallow the insult to keep deals and comfort, or make a hard choice that might cost everything. Money and a partnership sat on one side of the scale, dignity and justice on the other. She remembered nights of quiet indignity and mornings of fighting for respect. This was not just about one ruined dress. It was about who gets to decide what is acceptable in a world that still measures people by old rules. The decision came slowly, with careful words. She would not accept humiliation as the price of business. She would step away from deals that required her silence. Saying no felt like cutting a rope that had held her company's growth to someone else's shame. It was a risky, lonely move, but it was also honest. Soon the air changed. Phones that had laughed now shared, and those shares found strangers who hated cruelty. The story grew legs overnight. Her calm response became a headline. Yet powerful people began to press back, using old tools: threat, law, and whispers. The family with money moved quickly, trying to rewrite the tale before anyone read the truth. The backlash arrived like a storm. Quiet, well-prepared messages, legal papers, a plan to flip the story, make the injured look unstable, and the privileged look afraid. A doctored clip appeared online, claiming to show her as aggressive, threatening the child who had humiliated her. The fake footage spread fast and looked real enough to plant doubt in many minds. At first, the falsified scenes felt like a new kind of violence. The video showed a hallway, a figure, a finger jabbed, all crafted to make her into the villain. People who hadn't seen the wine incident now saw only the edited confrontation, and some began to ask for answers. Sponsors hesitated. Voices that had cheered now whispered. The company's accounts were strained, partners stalled, and the machines of reputation spun their slow, dangerous gears. But the old housekeeper had been prepared. Her years of careful keeping were not only notebooks. She had photos, memos, recorded conversations, and paperwork that pointed to patterns of theft and cruelty. When those documents met a team that knew how to sort them, the forgery began to look sloppy. Reflections in a polished door, mismatched timestamps, and small technical errors gave the lie away to anyone willing to look closely. They called experts. Forensics showed edits and layers where none should have been. Recordings pulled from decades ago lined up with the diarist's notes. The proof was not a single big thing but a tidal set of little things that together formed a clear pattern. As investigators checked metadata and compared files, the plan to drown truth in lies started to fail. Pressure tightened around her company, yet support swelled from unexpected places. People who had been ignored for years came forward to tell their stories. Once, hidden victims stepped into light, and their stories matched the old woman's journals. The noise of doubt became a chorus demanding investigation. Federal agents opened doors to buildings where once nothing could touch what happened behind the polished facade. Still, the family fought back with everything money could buy: lawyers, PR, and a media campaign designed to confuse and divide. The fake video narrative painted a picture of a powerful leader who used force to get her way. Board members felt nervous. Some considered replacing her to calm markets, to stop the bleeding. She watched as the world tried to choose comfort over truth. Yet in quiet rooms, allies worked to prepare a different moment alive, public telling that could not be easily edited or hidden. A press conference was planned with open cameras and real experts, with the housekeeper beside her, documents laid out for anyone to examine. They would show the details of financial manipulation, wage theft, and deliberate cover-ups alongside the shallow forgery that had been used to hurt her. On the night before the public reveal, doubt crept in, fear of what more the powerful could do, worry about the people who might lose jobs as partners withdrew, and the very real threat of violence aimed at those who spoke. The older woman pressed a hand to her arm and whispered that fear had kept her quiet for decades, but courage had never left her. The leader felt small for a moment, but then steadied herself with a calm she had practiced for years. When dawn came, she stepped onto a stage wearing white as a deliberate sign of clarity and truth. Cameras circled like vultures, but this time the cameras were accompanied by technical minds who could point to the mistakes in the fake files. Side by side, the leader and her quiet helper presented the evidence, piece by piece, explaining how small cruelties and secret transactions built a house of lies. They pulled apart the doctored footage, showed reflections that proved manipulation, and played recordings that matched the diaries. The crowd watched as the story shifted again, this time toward accountability. People who had been unsure found sources to check. Reporters who had once repeated rumors now had documents that would not bend to pressure. The powerful watched their strategy unravel in real time. The board who had feared a market drop now saw how integrity could restore trust. Allies returned. Lawyers prepared for long investigations, and the public began to see the scale of what had been hidden for years. The fight moved from a single night of humiliation to a wider call for justice. The release of the files started a slow, unstoppable unraveling. Investigators opened sealed rooms and found shredded papers that matched notations in the old woman's notebooks. Bank transfers led to offshore accounts. Memos showed plans to hide losses behind false deals. Each revelation added weight to the public's outrage. News feeds filled with names and dates that could no longer be ignored. Stocks fell as investors fled what looked like a house built on lies. Federal agents walked through marble lobbies that had once seemed untouchable, and cameras recorded executives being led away in handcuffs. The child who had once smeared wine on a dress became the focus of therapy and schooling, not celebrity. The parents faced legal and public consequences. At the center of the storm, she felt many things: vindication, sorrow for the people who had suffered, and deep fatigue, but also an unexpected lightness. The plan had worked, not because she wanted revenge, but because she wanted truth to stand in the open. The old housekeeper stood nearby, tired but proud, and together they began to imagine what could rise from the ruin. They planned a place for others like Eleanor, a small institute where workers could bring evidence without fear, where lawyers and counselors would gather, where those who had been pushed aside could find support. Money that had once seemed like a threat turned into a tool for protection. Donations came in from people who had been moved by the courage they had seen. At a board meeting months later, the company chose repair over panic. Partners who had left returned with conditions that matched the company's original promise: ethical work and shared benefit. The institute opened its doors, and people who had once whispered in corners now held meetings in bright rooms. The old woman's notebooks went into a secure archive, and her name became a quiet headline about courage. The final scene was not a courtroom victory alone, but a gathering of those who had been invisible for years, now visible and supported. She stood on a stage in the same room where her humiliation had once happened, but this time the applause was real and wide. The wine stain on her dress had never come out, and she said that out loud, Some marks are kept as memory, as proof that change started with pain. The lesson was simple: dignity is not a thing to be negotiated away for comfort or profit. Small cruelties can stack into crimes, and silence is what allows them to grow. When someone holds the record, when one brave voice chooses to speak, others follow. Structures built on cruelty crack when people choose accountability over convenience. She learned that power could be used to protect rather than hurt. And that truth, once shown in clear light, has a way of turning the strongest towers into dust. The housekeeper, who had kept names and dates on yellowed pages, sat among those being helped and smiled. She had turned a lifetime of quiet notes into a legacy of justice. The story closed not with a single triumph, but with a new beginning, an institute, new jobs, repaired lives, and the steady work of making sure the humble and the harmed would never again be forced to take the back door. The cost had been high, but the reward was more lasting, a world a little more fair, because one woman chose to refuse humiliation and another kept careful, hopeful records until someone finally read them. Weeks passed, and the world slowly adjusted to the truth that had shaken it. The empire that once stood high on pride now sat under layers of investigation, its marble floors and gold-plated halls empty, quiet, and stripped of power. The people who once spoke with arrogance now waited in courtrooms, facing the consequences they never believed would touch them. But for her, the journey did not end with their fall. It continued with rebuilding, not just a company, but a sense of hope. She chose to meet with small groups of workers who had faced things they never talked about. Some cried when they spoke. Some shook with anger. Some held documents like shields they never dared lift. She listened to every story with the care of someone who understood what silence costs. Eleanor, the gentle woman whose careful notes saved countless people, became a light in those rooms. She sat with the workers, comforting them the way she once comforted herself in the quiet corners of a house where she had never been respected. Her strength grew with each truth spoken. Younger workers looked at her with admiration, knowing she had paved a road for them to walk safely. One afternoon, the leader walked through the halls of the new institute. Fresh paint covered the walls, but the building still carried the weight of history in its floors. Sunlight poured in from tall windows, giving the space a warm, almost hopeful glow. She watched volunteers setting up desks, computer stations, and meeting rooms. The sounds of voices, printers, and footsteps blended into a gentle promise of healing. She paused when she reached the large room designed for group meetings. A mural covered the entire back wall, painted by young artists who had followed her story. It showed a woman standing tall under a stream of spilled wine that turned into golden light as it fell. The light flowed across the wall, touching smaller figures standing behind her. Workers, cleaners, interns, mothers, people who looked like they had carried silence for too long. Eleanor stood in front of the mural, wiping her eyes. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's our story now," the leader said softly. Later that week, she received an invitation to return to the gala hall, the same hall where everything had started, where her dress had been stained, where laughter had tried to tear her dignity apart. This time the gala was not hosted by the wealthy, but by civil rights leaders and organizations who wanted to honor her courage. She felt a small tremor in her chest when she read the location, remembering the sting of the wine, the cold laughter, the moment she stood alone, but she did not refuse. Some places must be reclaimed, not avoided. The night of the gala, she stepped out of the car wearing a deep blue gown, shimmering like calm ocean water. Reporters were there, but their voices were different now, full of respect, not gossip. As she walked inside, she felt the deep hush of recognition. People stood, not out of shock or mockery, but out of gratitude. Their applause rose like a soft wave, wrapping around her until the air felt warm. Eleanor sat in the front row, dressed in gentle lavender silk, her posture straight and proud. Her eyes sparkled with pride and disbelief. A woman who had lived in the shadows now honored in brilliant lights. When the leader stepped on stage, she felt the weight of the past lift from her shoulders. She began to speak, her voice steady but full of emotion. She told them that justice was not a straight path, but a winding road built by every person brave enough to hold their truth. She spoke of dignity, of courage, of countless unseen workers who kept the world turning. And she reminded everyone that silence protects the powerful, but truth protects the innocent. The room held on to every word. When she finished, the applause felt like thunder. People wiped tears from their eyes. Eleanor's hands trembled as she clapped, overwhelmed by the moment she had helped bring to life. After the ceremony, the two women walked out together into the quiet night. The city lights flickered around them like little stars scattered on the ground. They paused on the steps outside, breathing in cool air and letting the noise fall away. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't written everything down? The leader asked gently. Eleanor smiled, her wrinkles forming soft lines of wisdom. I think about what would have happened if you hadn't stood tall when they tried to break you. They both laughed softly, understanding the truth. Neither of them had defeated an empire alone. It took one woman who refused to stay silent and another who refused to stay down. It took shared courage, steady hands, and hearts strong enough to hold both pain and hope. As they walked down the steps together, a group of young workers approached, holding letters and envelopes. They thanked Eleanor for inspiring them to speak up. They thanked the leader for creating a place where truth was protected. Both women listened with full hearts. By the time the night ended, the city felt different, kinder, braver, more awake. The final lesson rested in the quiet that followed them home. Power built on cruelty will always crumble, but power built on truth will only grow stronger. And with that understanding, they stepped forward into a future that finally felt fair.